If you're going to be 20 days in a balloon with somebody, it's critical that you can get on with each other. If we can't have a great time, we shouldn't be doing it in the first place.
When you do a project of this magnitude, there will be friction, there will be problems, and we had our fair share of problems.
If these things need sorting out, or there has to be a blood, for God's sake, do it now, before we get in this capsule.
Once upon a time, 3 men took a notion to go around the world in a balloon. Their great adventure began with high hopes in Greenwich, England, and ended in deep depression in Marrakesh, Morocco.
There is a race on for a British team to be the first.
You're pushing technology and yourself to the limit on what is perhaps the last real aviation challenge left.
We're going to go down on Friday and get in a balloon on Sunday and go around the world.
Basking in the glare of his customary court of cameras, Richard Branson, the golden boy of British business, accompanied by Per Lindstrand, balloon designer and pilot, came to Greenwich to make an announcement.
Hiya.
So why are we making this British attempt to be the first to circumnavigate the globe non-stop by balloon? Well, as I speak, there are other teams busily preparing themselves to be the first.
One of these competitors was American Steve Fossett. In February 1995, he'd flown 5,500 miles solo across the Pacific, the world distance record for a balloon. Dutchman Henk Brink and 2 other pilots had flown the Atlantic in 1986. Brink had spent the last 4 years preparing to go around the world, and his balloon was virtually complete. Branson and Lindstrand's balloon was still no more than a virtual reality. They'd had much less time to prepare. They were aiming to set off in November, but in July their balloon was still on the drawing board and the route undecided.
A balloon has no real choice as to which route it takes, and so we just have to get permissions from about 97 countries to be able to cross them, and if we miss out one, we're just going to have to radio in and say we've got no choice. We've learned a lot from the transatlantic and trans-Pacific balloon crossings, which makes us think we now have the technology to go around the world.
In 1987, Branson and Lindstrand flew across the Atlantic in the largest hot air balloon ever built. There were problems then too. At liftoff, 2 giant canisters of propane gas fell off. If they'd ruptured, the balloon, pilots and launch pad would have been a fireball. Later they ditched in the Irish Sea and nearly drowned. Other men would have taken this as a sign, but 4 years later, in Japan, they decided to try to fly across the Pacific in an even larger balloon. After 2 days in the air, the Pacific balloon crash-landed in northern Canada. Branson and Lindstrand nearly froze to death.
You cannot really test everything. Something must be left to the actual flight. And both times we had minor problems. But these problems...
Minor problems that nearly killed you?
Yes. Are you speaking to an engineer here? But anything that doesn't hurt you is a minor problem afterwards.
Ever since he crossed the Atlantic by speedboat in 1986, all Branson's adventures have been followed closely by the press and TV, publicity worth millions. Usually when businessmen say they'd kill themselves for publicity like that, they're speaking metaphorically. But though the personal risks are high, there's little financial danger involved.
As fortunately, with all these sorts of adventures, it shouldn't actually cost us anything in the end of the day.
Literally nothing.
Yeah, literally nothing. I mean, with the Virgin Atlantic Challenge boat, the day after we did the crossing, we sold it to Narrow for the same price the total trip cost.
Classic FM. Obvious question, first of all, why?
It hasn't been done before, and we think that from everything we learned, we now have the technology for it to be done.
It's a very exciting thing to do because you're pushing technology and yourself to the limit on what is perhaps the last real aviation challenge left.
And do you think you can deal with each other for 18 days in the air?
We've known each other quite well. We've been through it together before, and it is going to be a great adventure. We're going to enjoy it and enjoy each other's company.
What about you, Becky? She's looking at you now.
Per Lindstrand, the sombre Swede booked to have fun with Branson, runs a balloon manufacturing company in Oswestry, Shropshire. Once a pilot in the Swedish Air Force, he holds the hot air altitude record. The race around the world could last up to 3 weeks, during which time Branson and Lindstrand would be confined in a capsule slightly smaller than Branson's sweater drawer. Nevertheless, they began to search for a third crew member to share the workload, do the night shift, and make up a third at Monopoly.
The person must be alert, quick thinking, without tendency to panic, to be able to react to something going wrong.
They spread the net wide. Anyone with their own TV show to promote could be a contender.
So you think that you're the sort of person who would be able to come with us?
To be airborne for 3 months, I would be perfect. I think I'd be neat, clean. I don't go to the loo a lot, and I need the publicity badly.
And you've had how many hours of ballooning experience today?
Well, I did a party last week for my daughter, and I blew up over 25.
You blew up 25
balloons.
Right.
Remarkably, the ideal choice from the thousands of applicants had been under their noses all the time. Millionaire Rory Mccarthy, chairman of Lindstrand's balloon company. A life-size action man with a range of interchangeable hairstyles, Rory broke 2 world altitude records for hang gliding and skydiving, both from balloons piloted by Lindstrand. He also raised £400,000 in sponsorship to buy his seat on the flight.
The third person in this project had to be a contributor, had to bring something to the project. It's not just about money and sponsorship, it's about safety, and I have the parachuting altitude record. I've skydived from the altitudes that we're going to. I love speed, velocity, I love power, and in a physical sense. I'm a pilot. I fly fighter jets. I have one that goes faster than the speed of sound and one that goes close to it. Not particularly the most de-stressing of sports hobbies.
It's a tiny clique, successful businessmen who are made of the right stuff and keen on ever so hazardous pursuits.
Fortunately, with Rory, we got the best of both worlds. We got a great personality and a contribution towards the cost of the project.
If I am one of the first 3 men, one of the team that goes around the world first, nobody will ever be able to take that away from us.
The first person ever to fly was a Frenchman called Francois Piltre de Rozier. In 1783, he flew for 20 minutes in a balloon made of paper. 2 years later, he designed another balloon filled with a cocktail of flammable hydrogen and hot air. Unsurprisingly, it exploded soon after takeoff. De Rozier, the first man to fly, was the first man to die in an air disaster. Despite this dubious track record, it was a de Rozier design using the safer helium gas rather than hydrogen that Lindstrand chose to adapt. The new design would be as tall as Nelson's column and capable of flying 8 miles above the surface of the Earth. Building a prototype flying machine on such a grandiose scale and ensuring its safety and reliability takes time which Lindstrand didn't have.
We're time-wise about halfway through the project, and if you look how much we have done, how much we've got to do, it's time to panic.
There was good reason to panic. During the Pacific attempt in 1989, their first balloon had spectacularly fallen apart on the launch pad like used kitchen foil. Branson and Lindstrand's partnership had almost crumpled too, over contractual squabbles as to who should foot the bill for failure. Yet the Golden Boy and the sombre Swede walked away from the disaster with their relationship intact. 1 year later, in a new balloon, they tried again and made it. Just. Malfunctioning explosive bolts jettisoned half their fuel over the Pacific and took them to the brink of disaster. On a 3-week round-the-world flight, any mechanical problems will be exacerbated by stress and fatigue, leading to the question, is the designer, his company chairman, and the big financier the ideal psychological mix?
My major concern is concentrating on the psychology, the psychological effects of 3 people being cooped up in a tiny capsule for a few days. That is scary to me.
Waves of perfect relaxation down your back, relaxing every muscle, cell, and fiber of your back.
When the going gets tough, the tough get therapy.
Liver, kidney, spleen, intestines, all your internal organs.
I've been seeing a hypnotist to literally get in a frame of mind that prepares me for being in this capsule.
4 and 5. Open your eyes. Stretch if you like.
I'm not doing it for the pleasure of it, because it's not going to be very pleasurable. In fact, in my opinion, it's going to be hell. That's good. I'm not going around the world to go around the world. I'm going around the world because I want to be the first man that's ever done it.
One of the most important things you're going to have to face, of course, is the psychology of the 3 of you up in that capsule. Now, I think it's important for you to get that in your mind, how you're going to deal with it. You need a strategy. In fact, you need 3 strategies, because there are only 3 possibilities that you have. You can either lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Churlish onlookers screamed, "Get out of the way, Rory," but action men don't listen. Within a month of the press conference, the team realised that Greenwich, their launch site, was too windy. Lindstrand searched England for a better site, High Wycombe, Oxford, the Weald of Kent. Amid the uncertainties, the launch date was postponed. Balloons need high-speed winds to carry them round the world. These are at their strongest during the British winter. They had to take off before the end of February.
When you get down to the exactness of getting the right weather, it didn't look that good. And in fact, we reduced the possibilities to 1 single day's launch during the entire period of January. At that point, one gets slightly nervous, of course.
They'd be flying in the jet streams that he and Branson had used successfully twice before. They're ribbons of air about 8 miles up, which move around the globe at speeds of up to 300 miles an hour. But no de Rozier balloon had ever entered the jet stream, so test balloons were built. They had to work out, for instance, the fuel that would be needed to fly 3 times longer than any balloon before.
Because we're flying in a helium hot air balloon rather than a pure hot air balloon, and because we're pushing the length of time that a balloon's going to be in the air from 3 days to maybe up to 20 days, there may be other things that will go wrong.
Like the balloon could fall out of the sky, the crew could fall out with each other, or there could be a fall-off in media attention. Virgin's project director was Mike Kendrick.
We don't even know whether de Rozier is going to stay in the jet yet. That's why the test balloons are being built. You have to fly these things. There's no question of just sitting in there and doing nothing. You have to fly these things every minute of the day, and for 12 to 18 days in a deteriorating situation. It's going to be a real nail-biter.
I was more frightened about our original projects. I'm not sure why I'm so much less frightened about this one.
The likelihood of a circumnavigation, in my view, and it's a personal view, is very low. I think 10% or less.
I'll give the chance 50% to make it, no more.
I suppose the most cataclysmic thing that could happen would be a failure in the structure of the balloon itself. Then we'd have a real problem, and then we would be faced undoubtedly with having to skydive out of the capsule. Now, skydiving out at 35,000 feet is fraught with risk. The temperature at that altitude is in the region of -70. Throw in the fact that when we skydive it out, we'll very quickly attain speeds in excess of 300 miles an hour. If you just jumped out and opened your parachute, the chances are you'd be hit immediately by the capsule and then by 187 feet of fabric whizzing past you. So you could not, in my opinion, hop and pop. You'd have to skydive away from the capsule and get as far away from it, as quickly as far away from it as you could. An early deployment at those altitudes would overstress the parachute to an unbelievable level and would undoubtedly cause a parachute to shred, explode, literally. The only debate would be what would shred first, the people attached to the parachute or the parachute itself. So it's not a walk in the park. And I think that's why I'm here. I mean, I can take Richard with me. I know I can.
The project continued to slip behind schedule. Finance was also becoming a problem.
We are working flat out to complete the balloon, and it's always difficult to judge the cost of a project of this nature. We have a project cost of £2.7 million. The original estimate was 1.5, and therefore out of the overrun of £1.2 million, Virgin is asking us to stamp up £600,000, half the overrun, which is completely unrealistic for a company of Lindstrand balloon size.
But it was Lindstrand himself who'd signed the original contract with Virgin, accepting that he could do the project for £1.5 million.
Now, in Pear's company, Lindstrand's, they'll make some money out of this project, despite the fact that it has gone slightly overrun. I mean, some of that overrun is, most of that overrun is not their fault as such. It's just making sure that we have a project that works.
Where's the contract? At the moment, I'm being faced with a signed document saying that I got to pay back £600,000. Essentially, it will mean for the next 10 years, I will make no profit of any kind. So I'm going to donate the next 10 years of my life to Virgin Group.
Surprisingly, McCarthy, Lindstrand's chairman, seemed to take Branson's side.
We were over budget, and here was a deal which halved the overspend, so that Virgin picked up half of it, Lindstrand picked up the other half. Now, is that a good deal or is that a good deal?
How much?
With practical and personal tensions building up, though the Martinez continued in front of the cameras, there were understandable second thoughts.
My 6-year-old son, Cameron, who I particularly adore, is at an age where he fully understands what I'm doing, the risks involved. The phone rang, and it was him sort of crying hysterically down the phone, and I found that quite moving, actually. He was actually saying, "Don't go, Daddy." I've talked about it with my wife, Sally, all through last night. And it sort of came to the point where I just said, let's just go.
History does not record Sally's reply. In Holland, arch-rival Henk Brink, using a similar method to Branson's, pronounced himself ready to go.
Hey, that's good. That's a good job, man.
Lindstrand had a foot in both camps.
But I built this, didn't know that I was going to be in competition with my own engineering.
Though his primary commitment was to the Branson team, he'd also helped design and build the Dutchman's capsule.
We have essentially 6 months to build the entire system and make it flight ready. These people had 4 years.
His envy of Brink was understandable. Brink had had time to plan and test his equipment.
I was able to test my balloon, to test inflate it in the space shuttle hangar at Cape Kennedy. We could inflate the balloon with helium, leave it for 3 days and see if there was any leak in the balloon, if all the lines worked well, and so on.
I'm slightly baffled. I mean, he seems to have extremely good equipment, and I'm surprised he hasn't taken off before now.
The American, Steve Fossett, spurning the high-tech, high-level approach, was intending to use the shoestring method that had taken him solo across the Pacific a year earlier. Once again, he'd go alone.
It's bad enough when things start going wrong with somebody else. To be on your own must be potentially nightmarish, and I think he's definitely a stronger person than I am.
Unfortunately, I would say the odds are against any of the teams making it this year. However, I believe I have at least as good a chance of any of the teams of succeeding.
I don't think this is a very good idea at all, and I don't think that he'll make it. And I hope he decides to abort the project before he takes off. He's going fairly low technology. He's a very capable person indeed, but I just don't think it's the way to go.
On September 19th, a worrying news flash. Troops in the former Soviet Republic of Belarus had shot down an American balloon that had flown into its airspace. The 2 pilots were killed. The implications for Branson and his team were ominous. After the shooting down of the 2 American balloonists in Belarus, Russian cosmonaut Vladimir Zenibekov was invited to breakfast by Branson to give his advice. Getting permission to overfly foreign airspace could be critical.
Oh yeah. The actual shooting down of the 2 balloonists, I mean, you say that they were coming straight towards a very sensitive nuclear area.
Yes. This is very close to the position with the nuclear rockets.
We believe that the base was so secret it wasn't even on the Western maps. So we are going to need to talk to some of these embassies. And I mean, the Iranian embassy, actually, I know the ambassador. I've met him on a few occasions.
Oh, really?
And he's very charming.
Selecting the right route could be a matter of life and death. Luckily, Branson owns an airline. Surely they'd know how to avoid being shot down.
We went through yesterday the countries that we're likely to fly over, and some of them we've black spotted, and we're obviously mindful of what's gone on in Belarus only a matter of a few weeks back.
I think we're just going to have to inform a lot of countries, and then, about 48 hours before we hit a country, you're just going to have to scramble, and if the absolute worst comes to the worst, we just have to decide whether to take a risk and go off there for 24 hours.
They've got ways of making you descend, though.
The fear of a forced descent prompted the 3 men to think about doing some proper training. Three weeks after they should have been on site ready to launch, the balloonists were finally able to make some time in their busy schedules. At the Royal Navy base at Yeovilton, they practiced a routine for crash landing in water.
I thought the tank training was more realistic than I expected. The primary problem I felt was the fact you couldn't see. It gave me a lot of respect for the water. I must admit, respect I didn't have before.
As they storm tested the capsule, even team members had begun to pour cold water on the project's chances.
As far as I'm concerned, if they land more than 250 miles off the coast of the Pacific, they're effectively dead. I can't get them. And that's the big one for me.
Don't you behind the wheel?
Rory too was worried. As the new boy, would he be ready in time?
The truth of the matter is that I'm almost the most untrained part of this project, because they at least have flown the Atlantic and the Pacific. They have experience of being in these enclosed environments, over the seas. I've never done that.
But Richard Branson didn't get where he is today by being a pessimist.
Rory obviously hasn't flown a balloon of this size before, but he's a pilot, and I'm sure he'll pick it up extremely quickly. As far as helium balloons are concerned, I mean, Per has only had a few hours, experience of actually, flying a helium balloon, and very few people who have had more than a few hours.
There are a number of critical tests, such as ice formation on the balloon, the operation of the helium gas valve, the balloon's behavior in the jet stream, etc. Regretfully, they weren't carried out.
How critical is this test flight now? Would you fly the project without doing this test flight? I mean, is there anything you've learned that you said that you don't need this test flight now?
Again, entry to the jet has not been explored. Icing hasn't been explored.
It wasn't a financial thing. I think it just became, Per is up to his neck in running a business and building this project. It just became one of those things which just, nobody had time to get done.
But we haven't had the luxury of time, and there has been a budget, and therefore I believe that I'm not saying corners have been cut. I think that's too dramatic, but I don't believe that all the safety precautions and particularly research into problems we might face have been properly tested.
We've got a serious search and rescue problem if we've got nothing at all. And he would at least like us to talk us into having this aircraft on standby, because there are places where there's no way that anyone can get to you apart from our own resources.
Right, but I don't think we could just ad lib that when the time comes. We're taking a few risks. I think it's one more risk we could take.
What's your view? I mean, can we find the money? That's what I'm saying.
Well, no, you can't ask me that. You can't. I mean, at the moment, we are underfunded as it is. I haven't got money to finish off the capsule anyway.
the risk factor of this project, purely through unknowns, has gone up exponentially. We're flying in a balloon that has never been tested. We're flying in a capsule that has never been tested.
I mean, what Martin can do for us is he can...
In spite of all the unresolved difficulties and the unrelenting pressure of time, the decision was then taken to suspend all work on the capsule so it could be driven to London for a press beano and reception. US astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, had been flown to London to unveil the unfinished capsule. It was an unveiling for Branson and McCarthy too, practically the first time they'd had a chance to see the thing properly.
It is of great concern that none of the other two people have actually spent any time whatsoever practicing for the mission with the balloon equipment. Apart from being inside the capsule for a brief moment during the press conference, none of them has actually been inside, sat in there, going through the system, being told how it's engineered, checklist, and there's been no time spent whatsoever.
How much would you like to be going?
I haven't been asked, and I'm not sure. I'm pretty busy right now.
There's no way that either Rory or Richard could actually land the balloon, if I got incapacitated. I mean, land it properly. I mean, anybody can land an aircraft if you consider a crash being a function of that. You can bring it down and say, but at the moment, there's Rory hasn't got a balloon license, nor has any balloon training.
In terms of preparation specifically for this project, no, I have not prepared to a level that I feel comfortable with.
Flying a balloon isn't that difficult a thing to do. After a couple of days working together flying, after a few hours working together flying, we will soon know everything there is to know about what's inside that capsule. The real place to learn is actually in flight. And if Per was incapacitated, the same thing would have to happen that happened when we crossed the Atlantic, and I'd just have to cope.
If something goes wrong, Richard's situation is even more dangerous than my situation. I can skydive from there. I've done it. I know what it involves. I can even hold my breath and skydive from there and survive. But what's Richard going to do?
The last time Richard Branson skydived, he nearly killed himself. When the moment came, he pulled the wrong handle. He lost his parachute completely. His instructors saved him by releasing an emergency chute. For Branson, parachuting from 30,000 feet would not be the easy option.
Good. It's far more likely that I will finally end up dying from something which I hadn't prepared for than something like a balloon attempt where we've well prepared and realised the dangers and are ready and willing to cope with them.
If we land in the sea, we're going to be as seasick as dogs for hours and hours.
You've got Maxillon and your kid there.
Maxillon, right.
Yeah.
I don't think anything is worth costing your life, but you never actually believe that anything is going to cost you your life. I would never write a will unless it was something like this. So in the last 10 years I've written a will 6 times, which most people maybe only do once in their lifetime.
5, 6.
7 weeks after the balloon was due to be on the launch pad, it was still being built.
We are on a plan now to have the balloon ready between Christmas and New Year, and it will be ready. But that was due to immense amount of sacrifice by the girls working there, because it's tough to work 3 shifts 7 days a week.
Over Christmas, the balloon was tested for leaks, but patience, time and money were running out.
People were concerned about being paid, and there were times we couldn't pay people, which was obviously a great destroyer of morale. That has been repaired now, but it has been replaced to a degree with very frail nerves as it comes to getting it ready in time.
Too few people working too many hours with not enough pay is not the ideal recipe for quality control. A pinprick or minor blemish in the balloon fabric could spell disaster. 4 days before Christmas, Lynn Strand and the Virgin project team put through a call to Branson, who'd taken his family to the Caribbean for a short break. The English weather was terrible. Should they too move south to the sunshine?
Hello, Richard.
Yeah.
It's Mike and Per and Dave Partridge.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Dave.
We've got the maps of Tunisia and Morocco with us.
Fine.
Now, on the weather side, we're comfortable that we're going to get the right ground conditions in Marrakesh. Even the most basic research provides calm weather conditions up until about 12 o'clock.
Okay, so for takeoff and obviously for the jet stream, it's obviously better, right? So that's weather, yeah. I mean, there's no reason why we shouldn't just be able to take off within a handful of days, is there?
We should be ready on site, technically, to go, say, January 8, 9, 10 the latest.
Mr. Wayne, face in. You okay?
The total cost of going to Marrakesh over the UK, I think, would be in excess of £100,000.
You really think you can get it all in within less than 100 grand, Mike? It sounds...
Well, not less. I said in excess.
Okay, good. So let's get to work on that. Any more news from America with the other balloonist? Has he taken off yet?
Hank Brink has gone totally and utterly dead.
Right.
But Steve Fawcett is definitely flying, and expect him to inflate within a week or two.
American Steve Fawcett announced that he would take off.
I think just stop a minute.
The outer skin of his balloon began to tear even before it left the ground. Not to be discouraged, Fawcett launched anyway, and the race was on.
But it's so difficult to predict the next 30 days. We may well be throwing a party for Steve Fawcett because I think if he achieves what he set out to achieve and beats us, I think he would have achieved something even greater than what we're trying to achieve.
The next day, Branson announced that he would take off in 5 days' time.
There is a race on, and if that means doing what Steve Fawcett's done, that is, say, taking off a day or two before perhaps the absolutely ideal conditions are there, in order to try to catch him up, I suspect that's that's something which is in our temperaments to do.
This news that they were going to take off came as something of a shock for Rory.
I've been very busy. I haven't been going to the gym, haven't been concentrating on my diet, I haven't done parachute training that I should have done. Rich has been phenomenally busy. Per is up to his eyeballs building the project. I'm concerned that we're going to go down on Friday and get in a balloon on Sunday and go around the world. In some ways it will make the achievement that much more astounding.
The balloon was loaded aboard a specially adapted transport plane that Branson had borrowed. Everything, men, machines and misgivings, moved to Morocco. The balloon's new home was a hangar at Marrakesh Airport. It had finally arrived at its launch site more than 10 weeks behind schedule.
I am confident that this is the place to start from, for all the right reasons. We're 8 degrees west. We are normally right under the jet. Normally, it's very calm here, and it was perfectly calm the entire month of December.
The Moroccan military had helpfully hosed down the hangar the previous day. Unfortunately, it was still ankle-deep in water. Hundreds of troops had been volunteered to help the project, but sweeping water out of hangars was not in the Moroccan Air Force job description. Eventually, the men joined in the fun. The multinational balloon crew set to with diligence, rallying round for the big push. The merest speck of dirt or snag could cause a delay. Stockinged feet, taped zips, even a pointed remark could cause a problem. Once the hangar was clean and dry, the balloon was carefully laid out. The doors were left open to complete the drying process, Sadly, the Moroccan Air Force had forgotten to tell their pilots. It was a graphic demonstration of what really happens when the stuff hits the fan. Dust from the tarmac funneled back into the hangar, and the work of hours was wasted. The forecast for a takeoff in 3 days began to look very shaky indeed. The project needed a boost. The crew were relieved to hear that Steve Fawcett had given up and landed in New Brunswick, Canada, 3 days into his attempt. His balloon had shredded into hanky-sized pieces in midair.
Mr. Fawcett, how do you feel? Rather disappointed and embarrassed that I didn't do better on this.
1,000 miles away in Holland, Henk Brink too was worried.
My balloon is 4 times bigger than Steve Fawcett's balloon. So if the same had happened to me half a day after takeoff, flying over the Alps, I can't see how I could ever have landed safely.
Brink's balloon was made by the same manufacturer as Fawcett's. There were faults with his fabric too.
The Civil Aviation Authority here in Holland, they have grounded my balloon after 5 years of work.
Undeterred by the failure of their rivals, the Branson team were buoyant. Another country, another photo opportunity. The lads unpacked their jumpsuits, the astronaut made what is in Morocco a very rude gesture indeed, and the Moroccan Air Force tried to redeem itself.
I love this. God, I love this.
To increase his aerodynamic profile, Rory shaved his head completely, and everybody made a thorough test of their underarm gussets. Dressing up was de rigueur. The man leading Branson's camel in the fetching jalabi is multimillionaire Matthew Harding. He runs an insurance company and is an 11th hour sponsor for the project, now more than £1 million over budget.
Richard Branson contacted me about 6-8 weeks before Christmas. I think felt he wanted somebody to be on the ground when he and Per and Roy were up going around the world, and quite why he asked me, I'm flattered he did, and I accepted his invitation. In terms of what we're happy to pay our way to contribute towards the project. What that amount is, as far as I'm concerned, remains between ourselves and Virgin.
By Benfield coming in, that's avoided this becoming an expensive project.
Seemed to make a lot of sense to us at Benfield's to perhaps, for the first time in a long time, put our name on a few things, given that we're in the reinsurance catastrophe business.
Harding's passion is soccer. He's a director of Chelsea Football Club, an appropriate team for a specialist in catastrophe insurance. 16 hours after he arrived in Marrakesh, he wanted to go to Newcastle to watch a cup replay. The project rapidly fixed him up with a private jet.
Given the 1-1 draw we had, then the replay's tonight, and I'd be pretty grouchy if I was stuck in Morocco and not being able to watch it.
Chelsea and Newcastle drew again. Chelsea went through on penalty goals. The cost to Harding of the 10-hour round trip, $18,000. And then it started to rain.
Well, it's strange. Obviously, we came to Morocco for perfect launch conditions, and they've had a 5-year drought, and suddenly we have a low right over the top of us, and the weatherman's saying that at least a week, maybe 10 days before we can take off.
Had the weather been perfect, we would have possibly been in the air today. And that would have left me with an uneasy feeling of people's deep understanding of the system, to impart the minimum acceptable level for a safe action during emergency is possible, but it means a week on site, and now it looks like I got that week.
This is the satellite software, which will allow you to talk to the outside world.
Technically, I could say every 3 hours, but if you're in transit and looking at the bird, then it's not an issue.
Outside of here, you have a boom this way, and you have a boom that way.
When you see ready on the screen, you've done.
As you see, I've set up a window here, Global Challenger email.
When I flew down, the news was that we were about to go. We've now been down here a few days. The bad weather has prevented us from going. It's given me a chance to be around the engineers and the technicians to ask all the questions about all the stuff that I was worried about. And actually, I'm feeling incredibly positive. I'm really looking forward to going.
You cannot pull it out once you screw it in. Oh, you can, yes. You just don't screw it again.
Oh, once you screw it in, you can't pull it out now.
Oh, no, yes, sorry.
There's quite a lot of training to do. I mean, it is a little more than with a hot air balloon. The important thing is actually just having time to talk together back at the hotel, just going through all the sort of what-if scenarios. A quick question. If we're pushed up into the Arctic and we stay up high, and we actually then cross the longitudinal line around here, will we actually have made the record?
Piltre has done a fantastic job. And he's had to do it, at the end of the day, even at the extended budget, at, whatever the eventual price is going to be, even that has had, their corners have been cut. So the original calculation was flawed. And I don't know who's responsible for that. But this project could never have been done for £1.5 million. Never.
There are very much unsolved contractual obligations between the Virgin and ourselves that must be resolved before I'm going to fly the balloon.
Yes. So when you melt it together, you form a bond at 140 degrees.
Right.
Should you, however, heat the entire balloon to 140 degrees, it will totally fall apart in its components. And there'll be 140 pounds raining down.
I think that there's enough stress in this project without adding to it. So I'm just keeping a positive mental attitude towards it. My relationship with Richard is fantastic. My relationship with Per is fantastic. I think I make them laugh. We need each other. What we're doing is potentially life-threatening. Can you imagine if we didn't gel together as a team?
To help the gelling process, Rory, Per and Richard hit the town. The team that plays together stays together. Richard and Rory tried to drum up team spirit by wearing indigenous headwear and dancing like somebody's uncle at a wedding. Per, however, decided to sit this one out.
I'm also about to step in the balloon with two individuals that perhaps aren't getting on as well as they should be, but on the face of it, it seems to be all right. And I feel that, if these things need sorting out, or there has to be a blowout, for God's sake, do it now, before we get in this capsule.
And still, it rained. Only 3 weeks remained before the fast midwinter jet streams would disappear until the end of the year. Were they ever going to take off?
Marrakesh.
Then it looked as if the weather might clear. They rehearsed an inflation, ready for takeoff. The pressures of weather, money and training had been such that permissions to overfly neighbouring countries had still not been secured. Without these permissions, they could be shot out of the sky. 3 out of the 4 countries in their immediate flight path were prepared to do just that. Algeria was the first.
France is friends of Algeria, Britain's friends of Algeria. I mean, if we can't sort Algeria out, we can't sort anything out, so...
According to the reports of the airbase, Libya may shoot.
Libya will shoot. You should see what the facts they've written. It is very firm.
Virgin Atlantic Global Challenger, regret permission is not granted. Please avoid entering Tripoli FIR. Stop. Best regards.
No, best regards.
Luckily, Branson, citizen of the world, had a few contacts up his sleeve.
Is Crown Prince Hassan in, please? Prince? The Crown Prince Hassan?
He didn't hit Libya. You go too far north and end up in Siberia.
Yeah. Prince? No. Hello? No? Hello? Yeah, right, is the Crown Prince in, please? And we got to specific.
Who are you, please?
It's Richard Branson, B-R-A-N-S-O-N.
Branson?
Yes, Branson.
Yes.
Good morning, Downing Street.
Can I have Mr. Major's office, please? What country am I talking about? Next one along. Algeria.
Hello?
Edward?
Richard, hello.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry. Oh, I've got one more country which needs doing. Algeria. I just wondered whether we could have an identical letter to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It seems that we're finding that overflying clearance is tougher than actually flying the balloon.
Theoretically, we should make it back to Europe.
We have a small problem in that Libya has sent us a fax saying that we can't fly over their country.
What a bore.
I'm not quite sure what your relationships are like with Libya.
Well, you can only imagine.
Are they reasonable or are they not so good?
Well, it depends on him rather than us, I think.
Sorry?
But we'll certainly give it a go. Why not?
I mean, we've really just got to give it 2 weeks to sort it out, and if we can't sort it out, we're just going to have to abandon until next year.
Sadly, even all the hot air in Downing Street couldn't float the balloon.
My vote would be to look it up and grovel.
No, it seems like the only thing we can do.
As a last desperate measure, they took out their atlas. The next country along from Libya was Egypt. Would the weather and political conditions for takeoff be better there?
Windy. Certainly the wind observations at Cairo Airport show fairly consistent winds. Luxor is much more sheltered.
Yeah. You know, if we assume Egypt, all we have to do is find out about local weather and define the location. Then we have to work out a critical path for the transport.
Oh, why don't we just try to transport it down the Nile? Seriously, let's look at it. Okay, it's a lovely thing to do.
And we only have 17 days left, effectively. So in 17 days, we've got to pack, uproot, move to Cairo, truck down to Luxor, and the real big problem is 3 helium trailers at 42 ton each.
16.1.
I wouldn't say it's impossible, but well nigh impossible.
So, the year's running out. The last shot. We could just go to Egypt, drive the balloon there, and then when that doesn't work out, we'll carry on to India. And by the end of a year or so, we'll be around the world, sea freighting across to Japan.
In the end, they decided to pack up and go home. And still the weather didn't relent.
As it turned out, it didn't work out, but if we'd actually stayed in Greenwich or gone to Oxford, it wouldn't have worked out either, so at least the odds were that much better.
Still unresolved was the question of the deal, committing Lindstrand to share half the cost of the £1.2 million overspend. Would the team be the same next time?
Well, it'll either be the same three, but I think Ruby Wax might have gone slightly higher on the list of options than perhaps she was about 6 months ago.
One of the problems that happened in this project was a lack of communication, particularly lack of communication, I believe, between Per and Richard. And I think these matters would have been sorted out over a drink in a pub, quite frankly.
When you do a project of this magnitude, you can't expect it plain sailing. There will be friction, there will be problems, and we had our fair share of problems. All those problems, hopefully we can straighten out this year and start with a clean sheet.